Welcome back, fans. We are here to cover episodes 3 and 4 of the Hulu series Mike that just came out today. Now things are really revving up because now we're getting introduced to his tumultuous relationship with Robin Givens and also the emergence of Don King. So for Mike Tyson, he's getting a very big lesson in manipulation on both ends, on the love end and on the business end. So let's get right into it. Episode 3. This one is entitled Lover and is basically revolves around everything that went down with Robin. So, first thing that we see is Mike starting off the episode. He's giving his monologue and he's talking about how he's never loved any woman that he's ever been with. And we see an image of him. He's sitting there in front of the mirror, completely butt naked, except having the championship belt. And that kind of symbolizes where he feels his self-worth is at because everything that he has now is based on him winning. Like his mother told him in the previous episodes, you better keep winning because once you stop winning, you're not worth anything to anyone. So now the women, the money, all that is coming from him being a champion. So he's actually wearing the belt in the bed, hitting this woman from behind. And there's a subtle thing you may have missed. When she actually speaks, she has a British accent. And I feel that was a subtle nod to Mike's real history. He briefly dated Naomi Campbell, and the woman does kind of favor her a little bit. So I do believe they put that in there as a kind of wink wink to that little brief trice that they had. But while he's hitting Naomi, he's looking at the TV, and who's on the TV? None other than Robin Givens at Soul Train, doing a little guest appearance. And I don't know if that ever happened. I need to go and see if I can find that. I don't recall Robin ever being on Soul Train, but she's talking about how, her head of the class experience, how she loves being here, has that lovely smile. Laura Harrier is the actress that plays Robin. She looks great. And the other thing, I talked about Trevante Rhodes doing a great job with Tyson's voice. I want to say Laura did a great job also with Robin's voice. Now, one thing about Robin, she has a very distinct, very prim, kind of chipper voice. And I think that kind of works against her in some ways because I think that's kind of why some people have a dislike for her just outside of the Tyson thing. She kind of has like a kind of a smart ass tone for lack of a better description, not a bad voice or anything, but very distinct. And depending on what she's saying, it can come off like she's being arrogant. Not intentionally, but it's a very distinct tone that she uses, and even in all of her roles. And I feel Laura kind of nailed that down when she pretty much sounds like Robin to me. And she has a great look. So because I told you before, these are half-hour episodes, so things go very, very quick. With this episode, you really only have about, I want to say like 5 minutes of them having courtship for the most part. They had the first date. Mike says, when he saw her on the TV, he reached out, did everything he could to try and meet her. They have a first date. On that date, Robin's mother, Ruth, and her publicist show up. So it's like a group date. And, they're there, the mother and the publicist, really to check Tyson out, get his vibe and everything. And it seems like her mother has her on lock and key. Like, there's no way that she's going to let this go down. She doesn't really say much. She's looking at Tyson like he's just, disgusting. She doesn't want him anywhere near her daughter. And she mentions that, you hit people for a living. And we find out through the backstory, the very next scene is them in bed. So obviously, Robin, she is head over heels for Tyson too. And she mentions that she didn't know her father very well. What she did know of her father is that he did abuse her mother. So, we're getting an idea that she has daddy issues. And then on Tyson's end, we know his father was never in the picture. So we have two young people looking for love, looking for devotion. And I mentioned manipulation, but I want to go first with Tyson's manipulation because he mentions flat out in this episode that he deliberately tried to change himself and be someone else to try and live up to what he thought Robin wanted. Because initially she wouldn't be, his girlfriend. He asked her point blank and she was like, "No, this is fun and everything, but I have my own, ambitions. I don't want to be in anybody's shadow. There's a lot I want to do for myself. And, being attached to someone else like you who's already made it is not in my best interest. Now, in Tyson's mind, he took that as saying, and he does a little funny reinterpretation of her words. And he says, in his mind, she said, "Nigga, you from Brownsville? No, you're from Brownsville and you're stupid. You're not up to my standards." So at that point, he starts what we call now love bombing her. Lavish gifts. She comes home. She has a bed full of roses, and eventually he wears her down, and they end up being a couple. What actually is funny, the boxing in these episodes is kind of really an afterthought, so to speak. You're not really getting any round by round analysis or anything. You only get like maybe 30 seconds of fight footage. We get a little bit of the Bone Crusher Smith fight, and that fight went to a decision, one of the few Tyson fights that went the distance, championship fights. But we have Robin, she mentions that him struggling in that fight a little bit made her look at him as more vulnerable, more human. And that was one of the things that made her kind of fall for him a little bit. So at that point, she mentioned she's pregnant. And for those of you who are too young to remember, there's a lot of debate around that. Some people think she was never pregnant, and she was saying that to force Tyson's hand into marrying her. And then other people believe she's telling the truth and she lost the baby, had a miscarriage. That's what she says in her own words in her autobiography that came out, I believe, in 2007. So I don't think we'll ever know the truth. But the reason it's such a sticking point here is that when she became pregnant, she didn't tell Mike at first. Here she tells her mother, and then her mother ends up telling Tyson's publicist at the time, uh, Jimmy Jacobs. So now we already see, first of all, everybody's maneuvering around Tyson. They're hiding things from him. We already know what happened with his money, but now his emotional state and everything, he's not getting anything direct. So we're starting to see really within the first 10 minutes kind of chips in the armor of this relationship. Next scene, he tells her that we're going to the All-Star game to have fun. He ends up taking her to the altar because now he feels like because she's pregnant, the right thing to do is going to be to marry her. She does agree to it. They get married. They start spending lavishly, and then things start moving quick in this episode, maybe a little bit too quick. We don't see Jimmy Jacobs in person. We just hear that mention of him, and then about two scenes later, he's dead. He dies suddenly. Then we find out that contract-wise, Mike has entered into an agreement with the other manager, Bill Clayton, but this is a very bad agreement because it also includes Clayton's wife and his children as having claims on Tyson's money. So terrible, terrible contract. And because he has no one in his corner now, he's basically being wrung dry by everyone. So business-wise, this is getting screwed by Bill Clayton. Now we're starting to see the manipulation coming on Robin's end and her mother's end because now they want control of that money. And you can argue that obviously she should because they're married now, but the way that she goes about it, I feel it really kind of shows why things fell apart so quickly. For those of you who don't know, they were only married for 8 months officially. So probably the biggest detrimental scene to Robin and her mother in this episode is when they go to visit Cuss's widow, Camille. Everything seems okay at first. They have, a nice little greeting at the door and everything. Camille is happy to see Mike, of course, happy to meet his new wife. They come in the house for dinner. So, Camille cooks Mike's favorite meal, gives him gravy, extra gravy, all the stuff that they like. And Robin and her mother, they look kind of disgusted. Now, initially, I thought it was just the way the house was, like the house was too homely for them and all that. But we find out the real reason is they are not happy that Tyson is financially taking care of her. He's paying the mortgage on the house. He's making sure she doesn't have anything that she needs to worry about financially. And Robin flat out insults this woman in her house, tells her like, "Why are you making money? Or why are you having my husband pay your bills?" I know your widow looked at him as his greatest creation and all that, but he's his own man now, and he's not going to be paying anything for you going forward. So Mike throws a fit. They have a big fight, probably their first significant fight. And Robin doesn't back down. They always say, happy wife, happy home. Now that Robin is the wife, she feels perfectly comfortable standing up for herself. Like, look, this is the way things are going to be. And you see Mike kind of not know how to deal with that because, he still wants to please her and make her happy. And honestly, he's kind of never had anyone stand up to him like that before. He hasn't gone into many rages so far in the series, but him being the champion now and kind of trying to dictate everything, I think he thought he could just run over her because he mentioned that he's never really loved any woman before that he's been with. So, one thing you'll notice in this episode is that a lot of the women, besides Robin and her mother, are kind of props. They're there for his pleasure. And you literally see them kind of strewn about the rooms and everything, once he's done with them. That's how he views women. So to have a woman that's not tolerating that to a degree, he does not know how to deal with that. So while all this is going on, we're starting to see Don King come around. Not directly. He's still kind of in the shadows, but he knows an opening is coming. So he's, meeting Mike at Jimmy Jacobs' funeral just to introduce himself and say that, you're a king and I'll be looking out for you if you give me the opportunity. And, Mike is feeling comfortable with him because who is Don? Don is a street hustler. Don probably reminds him of the older OGs that he saw around in Brownsville. So he's feeling that familiarity that he hasn't had so far in his life. I mean, since Cuss has died, so he doesn't really have anyone in his corner like that that could be a father figure that he also feels closeness to because they're from the street. So that's how you're starting to see how Don is slowly kind of integrating himself into the picture. Now, on Mike's end, one thing I forgot to mention, I mentioned the women being props, but the other thing with him is that all throughout the courting period and the marriage and all that, Mike never stopped messing with random women. So we're seeing scenes of him, when he's on the phone all giddy, talking to Robin, like, are you going to be my girlfriend? He's getting a blowjob at the same time from some other random chick. When he's putting in the order to get her flowers, he's smashing the attendant there that's setting up the order for him, like literally in the store. So he never stopped. As much as he felt like he wanted to love her and be there for her, it was still all manipulation because he never could change who he was. And that goes to the point of how they did this is not just painting Robin as a complete villain or Mike as a complete villain. You saw the manipulation on both ends and pretty much why they were toxic for each other. Now, who do you think is more toxic? That's going to be up to the viewer. I'd love to hear what you guys think about that. But it was coming from both ends. And things just got worse and worse in this episode. Like I said, it's only 30 minutes. So by the time we get to about the 20-minute mark, we have the incident that happened in Russia. For those who don't know, while he was over there was some type of physical confrontation between Robin, Mike, and her mother. Uh, the way they handle it is basically almost kind of like a tussle. He's chasing Robin through the hotel room. The Ruth, the mother, jumps on his back. He tosses her on the bed. Then he picks up a TV and he throws it, not directly at them, but they run out the room, and that's kind of it. So for those of you who are wondering if it was going to be any type of overt physical abuse, like how she said he was abusive and hitting her and things like that. We don't get any of that because Mike has denied that on his end. So they just kind of kept it neutral for the most part. So now we get to something that a little bit more controversial. We know the infamous Barbara Walters interview. You can find that on YouTube if you haven't seen it for the younger listeners. This was the incident where Robin and Mike go on this show, and she basically lays out that he's abusive, that he goes into rages, and Mike is sitting there almost catatonic. And it was very disturbing at the time, and there was a lot of backlash for Robin at that point. post Me Too era, so things would have been completely different. She would have got a lot more support, I believe, if she came out with this now. But back then, it was like you're airing family business. You have your husband looking like a fool. No matter what is going on, you keep that in the house. They looked at her as completely betraying, one of the biggest athletes at the time and one of the biggest black athletes at the time. Now, why he was catatonic, and most of us knew this at the time, he was on medication, manic depressant medication, which was making him lethargic and making him very compliant. Now, the way that they framed this, they made it seem like Robin was like his dealer, like she was deliberately keeping him in this stupor to keep him calm and allow her to control him. And we have a scene where the mother says, "What are you doing? This isn't going to work." And Robin says, "I have this under control. I'm doing what I need to do to make this marriage work." So that, is kind of like a little diabolical scene, but they do give themselves an out because, Mike does talk to the audience directly at several points during this episode. And he does say that that particular scene, that's what he thinks she said to her mother, but at the same time, I'm in this drugged out stupor, which he admits. He says, I'm completely fucked up. So I don't know if that's honestly what she said. So that was another way that they can kind of spin it a little bit between who do you believe, you know. So that is the full episode with Robin. Mike says, a couple points. When you hate yourself, how can you love someone else? He doesn't completely blame her for what went down. They divorced after that. They do mention the lawsuit that she had, defamation lawsuit for over $100 million, but that's essentially it, for that point with Robin. They have their separation, and we just kind of see Mike has been a complete failure at his first big relationship. So, with all this going down, you lose the love of your life. He admits that he was embarrassed on national TV. He actually says Robin was the first person to beat him, and then it's compounded after that. He mentioned, we get information about Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. For those who don't know, that's one of the greatest video games of all time for the original 8-bit Nintendo, which had Mike Tyson's likeness on it, and he was the final boss. But unfortunately, now with where his career is at now in real life, the reason why he was taken off of that game initially is because the license expired. They had the 3-year license on him starting before he won the WBC belt against Trevor Berbick in '86. So by the time we get to '89, the contract had expired, or the likeness contract had expired, and they didn't renew it. So that was why he was taken off. But in this, dramatization, excuse me, the reason why he was taken off is kind of implied all the drama that he's going through. Everything with Robin, all the chaos that's going on with women is kind of framed as he's not like a good role model, so to speak. So I'd say all that to say everything is kind of crashing down now. He doesn't have his woman, his rep is kind of lowered a little bit. He doesn't have a father figure. Bill Clayton is in charge of his money, but he was closer with Jimmy Jacobs, and Jimmy Jacobs is gone now. Cuss is gone now. Who's going to take that role? And that leads us into episode 4 with Don King. So unlike Robin, which I think was a mistake, Robin's backstory was basically told verbally. She talks about, her father not being in her life and all that. And all that really transpires over the course of about a minute. Now, what they did with Don King, which I feel was better, they actually time travel back or give you a flashback into the 1960s, showing his life as a hustler. They show him initially beating a man to death. That's why he served prison time. And he was a bookie. And the reason why he did that is because the man owed him money. So we get to see directly what type of man Don was. And then we also see how he was able to reinvent himself in prison and become a boxing promoter. I think if they did a scene like that, showing, Robin's upbringing, why her mother was really strict with her and all that, maybe even showing some of that abuse that she witnessed with her parents, that would have fleshed her out a little bit more. I feel like you really, if you don't know the backstory completely with Mike and Robin, it probably didn't hit you like it should have. So I feel like doing this with Don made episode 4 a lot more effective, which is entitled Meal Ticket. And this episode starts with 1989. So the reason why this is so important is because this entire year kind of leads up to the biggest upset in boxing history when he lost to Buster Douglas. So in 1989, we're essentially seeing how Don is taking over everything. Don completely takes over his money. So at that point, Mike is just spending, when I say spending lavishly, he's just doing ridiculous stuff. There's one funny scene where he buys a limousine and he's talking with the mechanic, and the mechanic is like, Mike, I don't know if I can do this. I've never done this before. You're asking me to put a hot tub in the limousine. I don't know if that's even possible. And Mike looks at him, throws him a couple bands, and the guy's like, you know what, Mike, I'm gonna make it happen some type of way. So then we see another scene where the hot tub is in the limousine and he's smashing a chick with the roof open. So he's just completely hedonistic. Training is an afterthought. You know, we don't even really see any training scenes. And even Don is like, Mike, you might want to get some cardio in and do some training. Well, Mike's idea of cardio is having an orgy while he's over in Japan, you know, with this fight about to happen that week. So he's completely just focused on just living the life. Now, one thing that we saw, and I mentioned in the initial 2 episodes, his sister was absent, and I felt like that didn't make any sense that we didn't see any scenes of his sister. So we finally get that here with Denise, and we finally see somebody that is completely in Mike's corner. We haven't seen that. And even like I said, with Cuss, you can argue that Cuss was in his corner, but remember, Cuss's motivation was he wanted to make Mike the youngest champion. He wanted to make Mike a monster. So it wasn't complete love. It was love with conditions. You know, Denise kind of represents someone with unconditional love for him and still his connection with his upbringing because his mother is gone. We still haven't seen his grown up brother, who's a surgeon. Denise is that only connection. And, you know, to show you how much love he has for her, he's literally like helping her update her house. You know, he's moving furniture around, new furniture that he's brought and everything. He wants to show her how much money he has now and everything. He takes her out to a nightclub. He's pouring champagne on random women. You know, Don King is in there living it up, and Denise is just looking at him like, Mike, what are you doing? Take me home. So while they're having the ride home, that's when Denise really lays it on him, and she tells him that, Mike, you're being a fool. You're letting this man control all your finances. He's going to dispose of you when you're not worth anything anymore. This is what happens. People will build you up just to tear you down. You're not being responsible. None of this is real. The money, the women, and all that, none of these people care about you. You need to get your head out of the cloud. And Mike is very upset to hear this because, once again, this is kind of implying that he's weak. And after what happened with Robin, he doesn't want to feel weak again. So he flat out insults her. He says, I make more money in a day than you do in a year. And you're just mad because my life is real, but you can't fathom this type of reality because you're nowhere near it in your life. And you can see the hurt on her face because it's like you are not realizing that I'm the one person in your corner. And unfortunately, that's like the last time he sees her because she dies suddenly. But I feel like that was the one person that could have really saved him from what Don is about to do to him, as far as just like taking him to the cleaners. You know, that was his one buffer. You know, I really feel she should have shown up sooner and it would have been more of an emotional impact because really we only got about 5, maybe 10 minutes of Denise and then she's gone, you know, that quickly. And so now it's back to complete control for Don again. You know, and Don had one tender moment. And Mike didn't even hear it because he was drunk and lay down in the bed. But he's telling Mike, as Mike is there, you know, trying to sleep off the alcohol, that what happens with athletes is that, you know, he says white people won't pay for the truth, but they'll pay for a show. They'll pay to watch Michael Jordan dunk. They'll pay to watch Michael Jackson moonwalk. They'll pay to watch you knock people out. And they'll do that because just watching you, you know, the few successful ones, that's enough to keep their minds off all the ones that they exploit and keep oppressed, which is basically the rest of the the Black community for the most part. And he says, I don't want you to be a monster. I want you to be a king. I want you to be our king. And it's a real tender moment, seeing Don King of all people say that, it feels like genuine love, but it's very short-lived. The words don't match up with the actions with Don. He's essentially controlling all the money, and when Mike tries to bring it up, he knows exactly what to say to subdue Mike. He's like, I got you the punch out game. Don't worry, you're richer than anyone in existence. I'm taking care of your money, having not always taken care of you. And when they fast forward to the current day, and Mike is reflecting on this, he talks about how he wanted that father figure. That's what he's been searching for, and it took him so long to realize that these guys that are coming into your life they're not your father. They're here just to make a buck. And he says flat out that Don King was probably one of the biggest mistakes of my life. And that all leads up to 1990 with Buster Douglas. Now, one thing I want to say about this Buster Douglas fight, this guy looks nothing like Buster. And he's the guy is built like the Incredible Hulk. I mean, like he is massive. He's like looming, and Javante Rose is not a small guy, but this guy's towering over him. He's like built like a tank. And one thing I really liked about that, besides, Buster not looking historically accurate, but they did a jump scene that was really, really cool. So, like I mentioned before, when Tyson was over there in Tokyo, he was doing no training. He was doing orgies with as many Asian women as he can get his hands on. So they show a little bit of that. They show him in his suite, sleeping with all these women. And then he gets out of the bed with his robe on and he's having a drink. And you know what they always say, what you do in training is going to be reflected game time. So if you're bullshitting in training, it's going to be BS on the court. So we get to see that in real time. So he's sitting there drinking in his robe, looking out of the suite. And then it jumps to him getting punched in the face by Buster. But the reason why this looks so cool is that he literally still has the robe on and he still has the drink in his hand. So you can get that full symbolism of you did nothing in training, that nothing is in the ring right now. So you literally get a few scenes of him getting punched in the face while holding the drink goes flying, the robe is flapping all over the place. So I'd never seen that done, with a boxing rendition in the ring, but none of the Rocky movies or anything. So I thought that was really funny to see. So they replayed, the famous knockdown. You see Tyson get knocked down, searching for his mouthpiece. You get all of that, and then you get Don in the corner telling him, "Don't worry about anything. I'm going to make sure I get you your belt back." So they kind of skip over. For those of you who don't know, there's a little bit of controversy with that fight. Mike had knocked Douglas down a couple rounds earlier. Don King in real life tried to claim that that was a long count and that Tyson really should have won the fight. You don't get any of that, and really, we frankly didn't have enough time because you only have 30 minutes. So after the knockout, he's literally back in New York, trying to figure out what his next moves are going to be. He still has a lot of negative press from the Robin situation. Word has come out that he possibly was abusing her. He's denying that to Don King. But one of the things that's kind of hints that the worst is yet to come. At the end of the episode, he mentions that the people still love him. Even with everything that's going on, the Robin situation, losing the punch out cover, sister passing, he's at rock bottom. But he says, the people still love me. So he's like, I could still get away with things. I, so he looks at the camera and says, I'm going to act up even more. So that lets you know things are going to get a lot worse going into episode 5 and episode 6. So out of these two episodes, I want to say the meal ticket one, which is episode 4, I feel like that was a lot better. It lays out a little bit more the manipulation that you're seeing with Don King. And that's because we got some backstory, more backstory on Don King. Tyson even mentions that he's almost like a preacher. He's mesmerizing the way he talks. He knows the street language. He knows exactly how to talk to Tyson to get him compliant to whatever he wanted him to do. That is the complete opposite of Robin. Robin she never could really break through to Mike in a way that he can understand. Once he wasn't really captivated by her beauty anymore and kind of the newness of the relationship, she wasn't able to keep her hold. And she tried to keep her hold, with drugs and things like that and manipulation, but it didn't work. But I feel like that episode wasn't as strong because we didn't get enough backstory on Robin and her mother. Her mother was a very intriguing, just the way she presented herself. She was always kind of in the background with all the scenes, just looking on with no approval and looking on with the stuff. I feel like we got a little bit more backstory with Robin and her mother. That could have made it a little bit more of a stronger performance, so to speak. And I feel like we got that with episode 4 with Don King's presentation, but we didn't get that with Robin. So I feel like if you didn't know the full story, it's not going to hit you as good as episode 4 did. But things are still going along pretty good. It's definitely still, I think we're all invested now. We're 4 episodes in. We have 4 more. I believe that next week is also going to be 2 episodes at once. So we're going to get, I believe, the rape situation, and also jail time, because that's going to lead us into probably 91. And then at that point, he's in jail until 94. So let me know what you think of the series so far. Obviously, we know Mike does not support this, but if you're curious enough that you're still here, I still think it's worth watching, particularly if you're younger and don't know the full story about Robin Givens and Don King and their relationships and manipulations with Tyson. I feel like this will at least give you a very strong overview to get an idea of how he descended so quickly. But that's it for me. Next review will be next Thursday, right after the episodes air, which will be at midnight. So look for this review probably by the time you wake up in the morning. And for those of you who are also tuning in to House of the Dragon, I'll be having a review up on episode 3 and the crab feeder and all that good stuff on this coming Monday. So looking forward to hearing your comments, and take care.